what advice would you give yourself early in your career to advance yourself sooner rather than later? So different than the...
One of the things I'd say to me is like, step off. I was very opinionated. I thought my ideas were right. Well, I was sure they were. I mean, they were obviously right because I could tell. But I think stepping off of my own perception of what was right and wrong. And I don't mean ethics wise, I just mean of how things should be done. Being humble, learning, listening, those kind of things, like really important. Also being willing to admit failure. I kind of sidestepped it. It's one of those, like when you trip and you're looking around and nobody saw you, you kind of act like nothing happened. I tended to do that. And I think a little bit of, I probably had, and I think a lot of people have this, an imposter syndrome, where I worked my butt off and getting into opportunities so I could pursue that opportunity. On paper, I was almost never qualified. And so, and by the way, that wasn't just early in my career. Like I can remember one time I was at LinkedIn, I was sitting inside a monetization meeting with, the C-level people of the company. And these are people who are like, Wharton MBAs and like super whip smart people, the best people in Silicon Valley. And, I'm this kid from like Nebraska who went to school basically to wrestle and didn't have any of the sort of life experiences they had. And I looked around the room and realized like, it was the first moment of me at the first time realizing that I felt like I belonged there. But up until that point, I hadn't. So I think it's important to like cut yourself some slack and, realize that you do belong and invest in be humble, but I mean, like give yourself some credit for who you are. And the final thing I would say is like, be your authentic self. Bring your authentic self to the table. For whatever reason, think we have to be like other people. We have to fit in with other people. And we have to think, say, and believe the same way they believe. Not true. You're going to be best when you're authentically you. I mean, like, don't be a jerk. Don't treat other people poorly. I just mean like, I'll give you an example of this. This may not be a popular thing to talk about, but I moved from Chicago to Austin recently. I love the city. It's so much of a fun city, but I have to tell you, it's a really easy place not to live right now. It's politically a mess. But one of the things I noticed when I came to Austin, and I came down right during the heat of this like political election in the US right now, but here, this is like like a blue dot in a red state. And I found it very like liberating. Most people here that I see, they have friends and know people who think very differently than they do. And they can have a civil discussion about who they are, what they believe, and why. They're not like fighting in the streets. They're not arguing about it. They're like, this isn't entirely true, but mostly having a discussion about it. And that can be true of any that was happen to be political, but in other areas, I think realizing that like, bring your authentic self, respect other people's beliefs, but like be you. And I think that helps a lot early on because we somehow have this belief that we have to be like the other people that we work with or that we interact with. And I think that's simply not true. If you're in an organization that doesn't accept you for who you are, I'd question that. And I'd look for one that does.